Hi everybody. Welcome to this session. So as introduced and as in the title, we're going to talk about post-quantum cryptography today. My name is Frank Michaud. Matt and I are working both in the Security and Trust Office organization of Cisco. That's the office taking care, securing all Cisco, its products and services. And more in particular, we are part of the cryptographic services. Matt?
Hi, I'm Matt Stevens. I'm an architect on the cryptographic service team. I've been with Cisco for a little bit over 10 years.
Thanks, Matt. So, as part of the cryptographic services, we have been dealing a bit with PQC for some time. So that's the spirit of this session, to share a bit, socialize the concept, share our learning and understanding in what we are doing today. Okay, let's go. Next is there. Okay, disclaimer, I guess you have seen that many times. I won't go in detail. So today, we're going to split our presentation in two parts. More like a theoretical introduction about what is PQC, post-quantum cryptography, some details about use cases, some details about the algorithm themselves, as well as some details about the standard. Matt's going to go in the more interesting part where the impact of how to operationalize that, how to get that in the product. Okay. Let's go next. So, before I go, who in the room has reasonable notion about what is PQC, what it stands for, and have been working with it? Can you raise your hands? Okay, good. So there is a fair part. So I guess the rest, who has never heard about PQC before joining that week in RSA? Okay, nobody. Good. So we are trying to, in the presentation, to give you an overall understanding, as well as going a bit more in the deeps and roots for those who have a bit notion about that, and that's a goal. So why are we here today? We are here today because there is a quantum computer that is gaining strength, and that is going to break our cryptography. But what part of cryptography is going to break? So what is at risk today is the public key cryptography has been defined up to now. So this is Diffie-Hellman, RSA, and ACC. Okay, these are cryptographic algorithms that are based on mathematical problem, the big number factorization and the discrete logarithm problems, which are weak against an attack from algorithm from Shor that has been creating in '94, and that's going to be enabled to be very efficient on quantum computer when they are powerful enough. What is not at risk is the symmetric cryptography, typically AES, signature hash schemes like SHA-2 and SHA-3. Okay, there is benefits for an attack that exists on symmetric cryptography called the Grover algorithm from '96, but the fact that the gain is a factor 2. So there is an easy trick to be still secure against quantum computer with AES is simply to double the key size. Okay, so that's small detail, but consider symmetric and hash algorithm as being safe. I just would like to cover some details about things I've heard or things I'm hearing around for some times around the quantum computer, quantum cryptography. So I heard people saying, oh, quantum computers is not a thing, it's not there yet, we have no problem. Okay, so it is a thing. There are many instances around the world existing and running. They are maybe not powerful enough today to break RSA, but they will break RSA. That's a fact. We have heard that from the great cryptographers from the cryptograph panel the other day at the keynotes. This is a fact. You need to take that as granted. Okay. I heard a couple of times people using the term quantum cryptography, not post-quantum, but just quantum cryptography. So the post-quantum cryptographic algorithm are algorithms that are based on standard math. They are not using quantum physics properties. They are just standard algorithms with standard math, using standard math problem. But these math problems are hard even for a quantum computer. Okay? So it's important to distinguish that. A quick note, you might have heard or will hear in the future something called quantum key distribution. So that's a very good tool to distribute a key on both sides of the line using quantum properties of the particles. Okay, But it's not really an algorithm as such, it's a technique, okay? And that's out of scope of this presentation. That's something working very well with some limitation, but it's not something that can be standardized or using at big scales around the internet. That's why we don't cover it here. So coming back on the problem of, okay, when does the quantum computer will break RSA? We don't know. We have estimates, we have likelihood, right? I think that I've heard some estimation that we need about 1,000 qubits. So I've heard stuff about 1,000 qubits to 100,000 qubits. But the fact is that we don't know. The fact as well is that it will be broken. And there is a highly likelihood. Here you can see data about the experts estimate the likelihood of a quantum computer to break RSA 2048 in 24 hours. Okay? So you make your own opinion. The reality is that there is a risk. And actually there is more than a risk. There is an attack actually existing today. Okay? And that's called the harvest now, decrypt later. So people today are already recording data, traffic, encrypted by public cryptographic means in order to keep it stored somewhere and crack it when the quantum computer will be available. So if you have data today that has a confidentiality requirement of 20 years. Obviously, with this model, you have a high risk that you're going to be broken. If it's 50 years, it will be broken, right? So there is already a threat now. So what do you do with the threats? Okay, how do you deal with that? So for organizations to secure themselves, this is no rocket science. You need to have first a good cryptographic hygiene. Okay, know what you're using as a tool. And it's not that easy, okay? Many companies, we are all in the same situation where we have stuff everywhere and we don't really know what's inside, okay? So here I'm giving you some kind of angles or lens on which you can try to find out where do you use really cryptography, public key cryptography. Typically, you can use that in image signature. If you have an organization publishing application on an app store, you're gonna sign your app. So here you're using that. We in Cisco, we insert device identity in our boxes to fight counterfeiting. So here we have certificates inside boxes. The TLS, as you use every day to go on the internet, securing internet, HTTPS, right? That's everywhere. And generic signature, right? You can have a hard disk store encrypted. You're most probably gonna have public encryption doing the encryption. Then you need to classify that. You need to understand the lifetime of the key I mentioned before, right? The harvest today, harvest now, decrypt later. So you need to understand what is your confidentiality requirement, or for a signature to hold the authenticity, the trust for how many years, right? So you need to understand that. You need to understand the lifetime of the device. If we are pushing a device today in Cisco in IoT domain, we might have a device that needs to last 50 years out there, 30 years. So this device will live in a post-quantum world. You need to understand as well the key strength, and now as well, since the algorithms are changing a bit, you need to understand the capacity, the device capacity. In IoT domain, like limited domain, you might be a problem. And then you need to make your prioritization. Like, look at the crown jewels, what are the high-risk stuff, and take care of that first. A small kind of sneak peek on what happened. So, like in the late 2000s, SHA-1 got broken, okay? And that's the first generation of the hash algorithm. And it's just to give you, it's gonna be phased out fully in 2030. So it's give you a bit of it's not an easy job to migrate from a crypto suite to another. And here is just an hash algorithm. There is no key involved. So it's gonna, and the challenge we have ahead is way bigger than that, okay? So we talk about date, when it's gonna be broken. The message you heard all this week, I heard that, start today. Don't wait, okay? Because it's a difficult challenge. Very quickly, here, looking at the use cases I mentioned, so I talk about image signing. I want just to give you a lifetime. So image signing, when you sign an image, either to inject in a device to make a secure boot or to prove that on an app store, you can have order of magnitude 2 to 10 years, right? To give you a bit of an idea. Device identity, I mentioned, right, already. 10 to 30 years, can be even more in some cases. And TLS, it's a bit more easy because TLS, normally the certificate lifetime is about 13 months, if I'm not mistaken. Now, I'd like to go into the algorithm that has been part of the NIST competition for selecting the new PQC algorithm. So you can see them named, Sphinx Plus, Kyber, Dilithium, and Falcon. And this algorithm, I just wanted to place in boxes just to qualify. So they are like first type of algorithm and family of algorithm. So the type of algorithm here, key encapsulation and digital signature. When I saw that first, I was like, why do they call it KEM? Where does it come from? So what the NIST did when they started in 2016 the competition, so they looked about the public key encryption, what is the kind of the use cases around. Diffie-Hellman is really a key exchange protocol, okay? Then RSA is really a public key encryption. So if you look in TLS, in order to establish a session key, you have these two options. So what they say is that we don't really need, we mostly need an algorithm that can encrypt a session key and exchange it. So, and that's a bit easier than a full public key encryption that RSA is capable, but in order to make the challenge a bit easier, they released a bit this requirement. So what you have is that's the key encapsulation mechanism, which is more or less when you need to establish that, you just give the algorithm a public key, and it will generate a session key and share that with the owner of the private key, and then you can have this establishment. That's why the KEM, they are called like that. And the digital signature, there is no change in that story. Now I'd like to focus more on the family of algorithms that we have today as being winners of the round 3 of the competition. There is a hash-based and the latest-based, okay? And now I would like to take the challenge to try to give you an understanding of what is a hash-based in less than 5 minutes, okay? So I hope I'm gonna make it, but let's see. So a hash-based algorithm is based on a hash. So a hash, SHA-1, SHA-2, so that's a simple transformation. Let's take a message, pass it into a magic box, and you have a hash of a fixed length that is unique first to the message, per message. You change a bit in the message, you will have a different hash. And the other magic is that from the hash, there is no way to go back and reconstruct the message. It's a one-way function, okay? So now let's take that and try to start, okay, I will explain you now how to create a private public key pair in these schemes. So it's pretty simple. The private key is going to be a random number, okay? So here we have the random number, it has 256 bits. We're going to just take chunk of 8 bits. Then we take these chunks and we're going to hash them 256 times. And then we get the public key, okay? As easy as that. You can have the sense that from the public key, since you cannot reverse the hash, you cannot recover the private key. That's already a good trick, right? Now, how to generate a signature? So you take the message. In order to make something workable, you just reduce it as a fixed length, like 256 bits, and you do that with a hash, okay? Then you have this hash, and then you categorize it as 8-bit values. There is N1, N2, it's just the numbers, okay? Up to N32. So now you take the private key, you take the first chunk, and you're gonna hash it 256 times minus the number, the first number. And you do that for all chunks. So you're gonna get a signature that is in between the private key and the public key, right, in these hash transformations. Then how to verify? Then so you send the signature to the verifier. The verifier has the signature, okay? He has the message. So we'll take the message, he will get the numbers the same way that the signer did, the N1, N2, and 3. He will get the signature, which is this value in the middle, and he will take the first chunk and he will hash it to a number of time, just the n time. So it was, you have the value hashed 256 times minus n, and you're gonna hash another n times. So you can see that you're gonna have a value which is normally 256 times the hash of the private key. So you should get the same value as the public key. It is as easy as that in this scheme. The problem is that with this scheme, there is one stuff that's not cool, is that if you use once a key pair, it's divulgating a lot of information about the private key. That's why these schemes are called one-time signing, OTS. So with that, how do we solve that? Is that we generate a lot of key pairs, okay? But since if you use it once, you lose the data, so you keep a state, okay? And so you need to keep a state, and that's very problematic. Very quick, I will go very quickly here. As you can see, so there are many key pairs, so you have many public keys. In order to make it easier, you use a Merkle tree concept just to share the root of the Merkle tree for the verifier to verify that. So that's just a small trick. Now, how to pass to stateless? So stateless, the trick is that instead of a one-time signing scheme, what they did is that they took a few times signing scheme. So you can use a key pair, let's say 8 times, okay? And then they generate even more public key pairs. And so now they say, okay, we don't care about the state. You just pick randomly a key in that. And the probability that you're going to take the same key more than 8 times is very, very low. And that's the trick they do, okay? And that's Sphinx Plus. I don't hope there is no cryptograph in the room that's going to go into details, but that's more or less the concept behind, okay? Now the latest based, so we saw the hash-based family. The latest based family, so what they do is that they define a lattice. A lattice is a set of points that can be reached by 2 vectors, the base, B1 and B2. You have good base and bad base, okay? The good base is the private key, the bad base is the public key, more or less. So what do you do when you want to encrypt something? You take a point in the lattice, you move a bit with an error around it, and you send that value to the person that needs to decrypt that. If the person has the good base, it's an easy job to find the closest point. If you have a bad base, it's a really hard job to find the closest point. So this is the shortest vector problem, closest vector problem, okay? Quick note, you might have heard about the people around that, or you might have seen that. There was a paper saying that they broke NAT problems, which was a couple of weeks ago, which was not true, actually. But with this stuff, it's always hard. So the trust of that is based on these 2 problems which are hard to solve. The trust of the hash-based solutions are based on the security of the hash. So you can have a sense, some cryptograph says that they are more confident in the hash base because the hashes have been there for a long time. And maybe more trust that they won't be broken. Quick word about around the world. I hope I'm not too late. Around the world, so the standard around the world and what's happening there. So in the US, obviously, you have the NIST, you have the CNSA. Matt will go deeper in that later on. In Europe, you have heard as well, maybe in other sessions, that so the European Union has asked all of its members to start to act transforming that. Okay, one interesting stuff in Germany, they have published a list of algorithms inspired of what the NIST winners are there, but they have more than just the winners. They have selected more algorithms, and I'm going to cover that. One of the interesting reasons they might have done that just in the next slide. A last point, so there is as well an open source community called Open Quantum Safe that is part of the the Linux Foundation, I'm sorry. And they are there to help to establish crypto libraries that are PQC capable and to share that with the community. So I think that's a good resource as well. So that's a quick snapshot about the NIST competition, okay? So here you have the winner of the round 3. It's not because they are winners that they are standardized. So they won, but now the NIST is working on defining the parameter and how to test them. And that's not yet published, and we expect it very soon, hopefully. There are different dates passing by. So you can see there are 2 types, right? Latest and hash-based, okay? The latest, we had rumors it might have been broken. It was not true, but it's possible. But that gives you a sense that if they would only have lattice or hash-based, you take a big risk. So and these ones are not the silver bullet as well. Matt will cover that as well a bit more later. And that's why we have a round 4 to try to find other alternatives in terms of types of problems there is behind and maybe better performance or key sizes. You can see as well during the selection, so there was still, this one was selected as well, the super singular elliptic curve type of problems, but it has got broken in between. So to wrap up my part very quickly, Message is that asymmetry schemes will be broken. You need to act today, okay? Get yourself like just doing homework, it's easy homework, inventory, looking about classifying it, prioritizing it. And one very important aspect, if you launch a product today, it, depending on the product, most probably is going to live in the post-quantum world. So whenever you design something, create something, you need to think about PQC. Now we go to the practical part. Matt.
Thanks, Frank. In this segment of the presentation, I'm going to dive into some applied considerations when it comes to post-quantum cryptography. Now, post-quantum cryptography consists of quantum-resistant algorithms running on classical computers today. Before I move on to the next slide, I want to take a quick poll. How many people here are familiar with the Commercial National Security Algorithm Suite, CNSA? All right, cool, very good. So the Commercial National Security Algorithm Suite is a set of algorithms and their associated parameters pertaining to national security systems. National security systems can be boiled down to IT systems for the US federal government. Note, it is worthy that expanded interest can expand the audience for these guidelines. Now, CNSA 1.0, which was established in 2016, basically attacks the emerging threats of post-quantum by strengthening classic cryptography today, strengthening that those algorithms allow us to kind of kick the can down the road for a quantum attack. Now, it's worthy of mentioning, NSA has updated in April 2024, stating that increasing the key sizes of these classical cryptographic algorithms no longer addresses the post-quantum threat. On the other hand, CNSA 2.0, which was established in 2022, defines a set of post-quantum algorithms that are quantum resistant to attack. Now, the goal here is to define these quantum resistant algorithms to prevent a quantum attack. Now, moving on, specifically within CNSA 2.0, they do go into further detail around digital signing, for example. Digital signing has been pulled out between software and firmware signing and general purpose digital signing. The reason why firmware signing is pulled out from the rest is because the criticality around that. The criticality comes from the idea that once firmware algorithms are deployed, they're typically immutable, meaning that the algorithms we choose today need to protect the systems for the lifetime. Also, it's imperative that the firmware signing that we have today, that root of trust, needs to be quantum resistant to attack before we start migrating other components that will be quantum resistant. So now that we've talked about the differences between CNSA 1.0 and CNSA 2.0, and why CNSA 2.0 goes into more detail about specifying between digital signing generally and the firmware signing use case, I'm going to talk more about the firmware signing use case and the algorithms chosen within CNSA 2.0. These algorithms are stateful hash-based signature schemes. Now, they have a set of challenges and benefits. Starting with the benefits, it's worthy of noting that stateful hash-based signature schemes are the only post-quantum algorithms today that are standardized by NIST. They have been standardized by NIST with NIST SP 800-208, which was established in October 2020. It's also worth noting that stateful hash-based signature schemes do have a small public key size compared to classic cryptographic algorithms today have a larger signature size. And stateful hash-based signature schemes are based on proven hash-based cryptography that have remained relevant in the last 50 years. On the other hand, there are a set of challenges that are a little bit worrisome with these algorithms. First, the idea of the finite nature of these one-time signature keys. Basically, the amount of one-time signature keys associated with these trees are defined by the tree height. Also, state management must be properly maintained. If state management is not properly maintained, there is a risk that one-time signature keys could be leveraged more than once. If a key is leveraged more than once to sign a message, then information around that key is leaked. An attacker could derive that key and forge signatures, leading to compromise of that key. So now that we've talked a little bit about the benefits and challenges, I want to dive into more of the challenges with stateful hash-based signature schemes. Now, the amount of one-time signature keys that come from a stateful hash-based signature scheme are derived by an algorithm of 2 to the h power. H is the height of the tree. So for this example, you'll see the height is 3, so 2 to the 3 is 8, and you'll notice 8 one-time signature key nodes at the very bottom of the tree. Now, the call out here is just the fact that there needs to be additional planning before keys like this nature are generated. If the tree is too small, then there's a risk of key exhaustion. However, if the key is too large, then there could be some performance impacts, such as increased key generation times, signature times, verification times. It also comes with a larger signature. Now that we've talked about the finite nature of stateful hash-based signature schemes, I want to go into a little bit more around state management. The call out with this really is to talk about the importance of committing state before releasing a signature for verification. If there is any disruption, once that signature has been released, but state has not been committed, there is a risk that state could be reused, which would ultimately lead to key compromise. There's also the fact of applying traditional key management procedures overlaying stateful hash-based signature schemes. We're going to go through this example to illustrate the issue. So we do have HSMA here, and we generate a stateful hash-based signature scheme. From there, we take a backup and set it to the side. Then we move forward, and we do 2 signings with that key. So now the current state is at node C. However, HSMA dies. What do? Well, we go ahead and we initialize HSMB, and we use that backup earlier, and we restore it to HSMB. However, you'll notice now the issue is our state is at node A. This also imposes a risk that we could start signing with node A, which would lead, again, to key compromise because the state has been reused. It is worthy of mentioning that we can mitigate some of these risks with procedural tasks. However, procedural tasks do have that human element that does add risk as well. So now that we've talked about some of these challenges in detail with stateful hash-based signature schemes, I want to go into more detail around how NIST has standardized these schemes and how they try to mitigate some of these risks. So, as I mentioned before, the only post-quantum algorithms today are stateful hash-based signature schemes standardized by NIST SP 800-208. Now, the title of this is Recommendation for Stateful Hash-Based Signature Schemes, and you'll notice this non-inclusive list of guidelines that are in the standard. I'm sorry, I'm going to take water. So we'll notice the first 2 guidelines here are pretty familiar with traditional cryptography. Key generation and other crypto operations must be wielded within the boundary of a crypto module. Also, the crypto module must be validated to FIPS standards. However, there are additional conformance standards with stateful hash-based signatures that need to be realized. So first, for example, NIST states that the tree height must be 5, 10, 15, 20, or 25. This, coupled with the latest update by the NSA in April 2024, states that no multi-tree algorithms must be leveraged. So what does this mean? It means that that finite nature that I mentioned earlier on is limited with these guidelines from anywhere from 32 keys to 33 million keys, depending on the tree height. Also, illustrated earlier on about the challenges with reusing a key, which would leak information about it, which could compromise it. NIST states that you cannot use a one-time signature key more than once. Lastly, NIST tries to mitigate some of those state management issues by stating that no key export is allowed. So, I also want to add that the NSA in April 2024 has stated that unless you're a national security system signer, you do not need to strictly follow this last point, the no key export. This allows the industry to put in place some additional protections around the longevity of the key. Now that we've talked about some of the building blocks with NIST SP 800-208, I want to talk about a little bit more of the use cases that NIST looks for these algorithms. First, NIST states that stateful hash-based signature schemes shouldn't be adopted by all applications, especially online high-volume signing use cases. It's also worth mentioning that NIST also states that, well, you need to limit your footprint with these algorithms, and when alternatives aren't standardized, you should look to transition to them. So now that we've talked about the NIST standards and how the use cases for these algorithms are stated, let's move on and talk about some of those alternatives. The alternatives, top of mind, are lattice-based signature schemes. Lattice-based schemes are stateless by nature. This relieves a lot of the issues we have with stateful hash-based signature schemes. We're able to apply traditional key management procedures on top of lattice-based schemes. So we can take those traditional backups and restore them to HSMs when they're failed, and we don't have to worry about state reuse. We don't have to worry about the finite nature of the one-time signature keys. It's also worth mentioning that lattice-based schemes have a relatively small signature size. On the other hand, they do have a large public key size. However, the biggest challenge we have right now is that lattice-based schemes are not standardized. However, NIST is looking to standardize these in the summer to fall of 2024. So now that I've talked about some of the benefits and challenges with lattice-based schemes, I want to give a visual representation of kind of comparing post-quantum algorithms with classical cryptographic algorithms. So there are many ways we can assess algorithms today. The two I want to really focus on is size and performance. Size can be broken down even further between signature size and key size. So you'll notice here that lattice-based schemes such as Dilithium and Falcon, they have a large public key size, and in regards to classical cryptographic algorithms, they do have a larger signature size. On the other hand of the spectrum, we have Sphinx Plus, which is a stateless hash-based signature scheme. It has a small public key size, but a large signature size. In the middle is a sweet spot where we have LMS, which is a stateful hash-based signature scheme. It provides a small public key size, and in regards to classical cryptographic algorithms, it provides a larger signature size, but for the firmware use case specifically, that is acceptable. Along with size is performance. Performance can be gauged by key generation, signing, and verification times. It's worth noting that hash-based signature schemes are a little bit less efficient than lattice-based schemes. So now I want to jump into some implementation strategies that can be regarded with post-quantum cryptography. First is hybrid implementations. This is multiple algorithms working together to perform the same function, like key agreement and digital signatures. The idea here is it takes an attacker to break all these algorithms in order to compromise the system. Now, the goal is really so the goal here is to just provide many algorithms to prevent compromise. However, this implementation does increase the complexity. So before implementing this, you must weigh the benefits and challenges with adding complexity with the risk of a cryptographic algorithm being broken. On the other hand, we have crypto agility, which is the modular design of an application so it can efficiently modify or replace cryptographic algorithms and cryptographic primitives with minimal impact to an application. Now, I want to move on to some HSM considerations with post-quantum cryptography. So we know with post-quantum, signature size, key size, overhead, payload, all increase across the board. So this is really a call out that HSM specifications and deployment strategies must be evaluated against the algorithms and standards being followed in order to make sure that your HSMs efficiently work with the ecosystem. It's also worth noting that HSMs today are highly efficient. They get accelerated hardware, which allows them to execute these algorithms efficiently. On the other hand, as post-quantum algorithms are still being standardized, we're seeing less hardware acceleration with those algorithms. So as the industry matures, we're going to start seeing more efficiencies with HSMs. Lastly, it's worthy of mentioning that HSM simulators have always been a nice to have. However, with the post-quantum transition, the flexibility and agility that simulators provide will greatly benefit the transition to post-quantum. Now, I want to go into some HSM challenges with NIST SP 800-208, and this really hones in on the fact of the no key export property. Now, HSMs typically have a lifetime around 10 years. So if you have keys that need to be around for 10, 20 plus years, this could be a pretty big risk. It's also worth mentioning, not all HSMs last over 10 years or even at 10 years. They can die prematurely, and this could prematurely kill your keys as well, which is added risk. Now, I also want to state how there aren't, without proprietary mechanisms or additional standards, there's no inherent redundancy when you create a non-exportable key onto an HSM. Lastly, generating these keys non-exportable on an HSM creates a vendor lock-in situation. Well, what's the risk of that? Well, the risk is you have the risk of being obsolete. If that HSM vendor decides to discontinue that product line, or if they go out of business themselves, you could be left with unsupported hardware. Also, if you're locked into an HSM vendor for a lifetime of long-lived keys, you could have less bargaining power with that vendor. Lastly, it's just worthy of noting that there are compliance risks with this. If the vendor is slow to conform to governing standards, you may find an added risk of that vendor being in your ecosystem. So I want to wrap up with some takeaways from my segment of the presentation. First, we should look to adopt CNSA 2.0 standards as they become finalized. We should limit the footprint of stateful hash-based signature schemes and prepare to transition to alternatives when they become finalized. When developing applications, keep crypto agility in mind. And lastly, HSM specifications and deployment strategies, they need to be graded against your use case requirements and make sure that they follow your governing standards that you're going to follow.
Thanks, Matt.
And that's it.
Thank you for your attendance and attention. That's all for us, and we are open to questions.
Sorry.
Yes,
I have a question. On one of your early slides, you talked about device capacity. What did you mean by that? Was it compute capacity or?
Well, not the slide anymore. My part?
It was on the second or third slide.
Yeah.
Where you had class.
So now you have seen Matt's slides around. Do we have the slides now? Yeah.
Sorry.
So we have seen that slide from mine, okay? So I mentioned that these are all of the pre-quantum algorithm. You see they are nicely there on the bottom right. When I said that we haven't found the silver bullet, because the proposition we have now in terms of key size or signature size are pretty huge. So when you have a small IoT device with a limited memory, or you have a very slow like a connection rate, this might be challenging. Right, so that's what I meant. It's like today, for example, you might be very challenged to put that in a small IoT device. You're welcome. Any other question? Good then. Thanks a lot. Yeah, there was one. Oh, sorry.
Just to tag on that question a little bit, have you seen situations where applications or systems themselves, not the hardware side maybe, may not be able to facilitate large key sizes and
Yes.
that we're going to get? And how big of a problem is that?
So today, for example, Cisco, we are shipping boxes which are including quantum-resistant PQC algorithm, LMS not yet, but we have a predecessor from that called LDWM. You have seen that LMS in XMSS, the stateful base algorithm, they are problematic, right, for the backend, for the HSMs and stuff. So now we have product teams coming and say, hey, we need to get this box out soon. We need PQC standardized. And so we have the option either with going LMS in XMSS, which we're going to have our team crypto services with the HSM have to carry that for many years and struggling with that problem. Or we could have, once they are standardized, the option to do that. The features that we are talking about here is a secure boot. So you have an image, and before you boot the OS, you verify that the image of the OS is correct. And here, this is like firmware and piece of hardware which are very small, and they need to be very fast. So that can be challenging. We are starting to look about the performance of those and the size of those to be able to embed that, because you know silicon is very expensive, and that can be problematic. I don't have the numbers. I cannot tell you there is like 1,000 bits too much or whatever, but that's challenging. Yep.
I have a question. Do you also support the quantum key distribution
So
technology stack?
you mean as Cisco or? Sorry? Yeah.
Key distribution.
So I understood. So do we support quantum key distribution as Cisco or? I didn't understand.
Yeah. You know that you can use quantum technologies to exchange the key, even if you have symmetric algorithm.
Yeah.
My question is, do you support the technology stack? Yeah? Do you support the protocol to exchange keys?
Okay.
That's my question.
So the first part, do we support that? We don't do QKD in Cisco. There are great vendors out there doing that very good. I'm coming from Switzerland. There is a very good one in Switzerland there. What we do in Cisco, we have interface. And I think that's a skip interface. So in our devices, we have like, they are onboarding the skip interface that enables you to inject the symmetric key to establish the secure session. So that we have that across most of our products. That is being, no, not most of our products. That's being onboarded. There are products already with that, and others which is on the roadmap. Yes, and then we work with vendor to provide really the QKD link.
So this means that your products will support external hardware bringing in the key to your product.
Yes, I will just put like a disclaimer. We are not part of the sales team, and not part of the product teams. So I cannot really speak fully about what is their roadmap. But to my best knowledge, yes, that's correct. Okay. Yep.
Hello.
Hello.
Into the NIST table with all the crypto algorithms, we see digital signature, we see key exchange. We don't see this for the encryption. Why do we don't have algorithms for encryption as well into the NIST proposals? You mentioned why we started with the key exchange. Why?
Yeah, we have the CAM, but not the full-blown public key encryption schemes. And that's a very good question that I don't have the response. Unfortunately, that's on the NIST side, I assume. I don't know, Matt, if you have any insights there, but.
Just the fact that there's symmetric encryption provided by AES. But yeah, that's
asymmetric. I'm talking about the asymmetric.
Yeah. Right now, there just isn't there.
What I say, we were able to do everything. So the second question I have is that you talk about the hash algorithms, SHA-2, SHA-3, that are PQC quantum resistant.
Yeah.
How about the HMAC? The HMAC. If
so
we want
HMAC
to,
is
yes.
That's a good question. I would think it is resistant.
So you have a secret. You have a
you have a key. You have a key,
use.
but that's
How
based
about
on
that secret? What is the length? Is there any discussion about the HMAC?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. Yeah. But there are good questions, and I will look into that indeed, definitely. I would assume it is secure PQC, but don't take my word for it.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yep.
Thanks for the presentation. We have heard about some doubts about symmetric encryption to be at the threats of quantum computing. That means could be kind of risk for that.
So the threats on symmetric encryption is coming from the Groove algorithm, and the Groove algorithm on a quantum computer is just gaining you a factor of 2 in the speed of attack. So that's not considered as a threat. That's the only stuff we do is that we double the key size, and then we are good. That's about it. So in the algorithm there is the complexity analysis, and this is a linear complexity. So if the quantum computer is getting better by 2, the attack is going to be by 4. So it's not going to grow very fast. The Shor algorithm, the attack on RSA, it's a polynomial timing attack. The timing of the attack is going to be following a polynomial model. So you double the size, it's going to grow like very fast. So that's why it's considered as breaking and dangerous. So we can play the game for many years to just double the key size, as long as there is no another attack showing up. But that's feasible. So it's considered widely secure. Okay, thanks everybody.